Hey everyone, we are back with a much overdue, long awaited introduction and announcement. As you know by now, those of you who know that I'm Jade Simmons and I'm your one and only truly serious independent candidate for President of the United States. That's right, an independent, unaffiliated candidate. Why? Because we believe it's time now to break away from the shackles of this two-party system, which is no longer serving as many Americans possible. You know that in this nation, you can't just run for president. You have to have an incredible running mate to go with you. So about a month ago, I finally found my running mate. Let me tell you why that was so important. This was a decision to me that had to be complementary. I had decided that going into the White House, I didn't want a vice president for show, a vice president that would be in the background. I wanted an actual partner in purpose, a partner in solutions. And so while you've seen me out front, what you may not know is this woman right here has already been hard at work behind the scenes, making sure that these big, bold visions we're coming up with can actually be executed, can actually have strategy. So take a moment, share this now with people who you know have been interested in Operation Restoration, but have been curious, who's your running mate? So we're introducing her tonight. Her name is Claudelia. Get it right. Claudelia J. Roze, and that's Rose with a Z. We want every Secretary of State to know. And she is my vice presidential running mate. I'm going to be telling you tonight why she was my choice. We're going to talk about what it felt like to say yes to that kind of an invitation. Sure. And we're going to let you know a little bit more about who she is as a person. We've got a few more days left, 40 plus days, to be able to talk to you about policy still and her vision for the nation. But we wanted to take a moment tonight to let you know her as a person. So Claudelia, welcome. Thank you for saying yes to this. Just say hi to our audience out there.
Hello, Operation Restoration 2020 team. I am so excited. So excited to have this opportunity to start to get to know you all. I've had a chance to sit in and participate and lead some of the Meet the Candidate events. And I am so excited about the growing base that we have here, Jade. The fact that the message and platform that we have is resonating with so many people. And that's not surprising to us.
Yeah.
I think the fact that we have struggled with how things are currently going in the United States, the voices that are not being heard across the company or across the country, and just so many of the concerns that are not being addressed.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited. I'm really excited to partner with Jade and to give voices to a lot of those concerns. Really excited.
So here's what's up. We're going to keep it real as always. That has become the expected mode of operation for Operation Restoration. We're not going to stop that today. We're going to keep along that vein. So what we're going to do, we're going to just jump right on the elephants in the room. Let's just keep it as real as possible. We know some of the questions you have. We've been joking because I've been running for 9 months now. Remember that. We've been here for 9 months since January. And so I've taken a lot of those front end hits, right? So now we have fresh face, fresh vision, but you also got some fresh meat. So they're going to be coming for you, and we want to make sure she's ready. She's going to be ready. She's dynamite in a small package. Do not get it twisted. She doesn't need to be any taller, I'm telling you. So we're going to talk about the things that everybody presents right at the beginning as a concern, so that we can get that out of the way and then really spend our time talking about all the stuff that matters. You'll be hearing from her more and more. She'll be doing interviews of her own. You'll get to hear about policy. But we want to jump right in with a couple of the elephants. First elephant. Listen, when you pick a running mate, you're supposed to pick people based on balance. You're supposed to balance the ticket. So people are going to look at us and say, wait a minute, there's no balance there. It's two Black women. How is there balance? Is there any way that two Black women can actually serve a nation as diverse as America? Does it simply mean that if we have two Black women running, that we only care about Black people, that we can't serve the rest of the nation? Can you explain why I would dare double down and choose another Black female to be my running mate?
So I could go into tons of reasons, Jade. I'll address a couple. So let's talk about the balance issue. Obviously, Jade's expertise is in the arts. She's a concert pianist by trade, an incredible corporate motivational speaker. She's an excellent communicator, excellent leader as well. I've seen you operate in a number of different spaces. So what balance do I bring to this? One I think is one of the critical areas that I bring is a focus and a history on national defense and working with our military warfighters, our corporations, our aerospace and defense industries. I have over 20 plus years working in those industries. So I think in that way, I bring a great balance there.
Sure.
Just as we look over what's been happening over the last, 12 months or so, conditions and situations that are happening in India and China, obviously North Korea, Russia, and now with Israel. Yeah. There is going to need to be an incredible focus on national defense, an incredible focus on international relations. And I think in that area, I bring a great wealth of expertise that can help balance that as well.
But you're speaking from such a polite place of talking about your qualifications. Okay. So the assumption is that simply putting forth your qualifications, for instance, right now on Facebook, you could see her absolutely breathtaking biography. Go to Facebook, OperationRestoration2020.com. For those of you on Instagram watching live, check out her bio. You will see that she is more than qualified, more than brilliant, more than simply intelligent. You'll see someone who's bringing to the table something quite important. But what I'm alluding to is the fact that we have not seen a ticket that looks like this. Yep. The assumption will be made that because we are two African-American females, there's no way we can serve the entire nation, that we're going to be lopsided in our agenda, that we're going to be people only looking to serve African Americans. What is the hypocrisy in that judgment that you see?
So that's a good point that you bring up, Jade. The history of America's presidents and vice presidents are very homogeneous. We've had nothing but white males representing such a diverse United States. Yeah. Have the question ever been asked of them? Are they able to represent all demographics? Yeah. So first of all, I would ask the people to question, why are you asking that question now? We haven't asked that question before. Why is it now that your leaders look differently? Why is that such a concern now? But let me tell you this, though, Jade. I think if we look at the history of the United States of America, Black women especially have always been at the heart of investing and building up the United States of America. If we can go back to, and let's just be candid, let's just be real here. If we could go back to slavery, birthing camps, where Black women birthed the labor that went in to boost the economy of the United States, to build the economy of the United States, especially southern states. Yeah. Not only birthing the labor, but working in the fields ourselves, nursing children that were not our own, sometimes even to the detriment of being able to care for our own families. Let's just start there, okay? That investment, not just of our own labor, but of our own resources, many times to the detriment to ourselves. Yeah. Then let's look at some of the civil rights and equal rights movements that have happened since then. Women's suffrage, civil rights movement. If you look at all of those movements, Black women were a key and critical part of that. Again, a lot of times to their own detriment. If we think of the women's suffrage movement, which ultimately resulted in the 19th Amendment being passed in 1920, which gave women the right to vote, or at least said that the right to vote could not be excluded based on gender, that right was then won by white women, Black women who still participated in that, did actually not get to vote until about 5 decades later, when we finally had the Voting Civil Rights Act. Yeah. So if we look throughout history, I'm just going to say who has invested more, who has given more, who has really contributed to the growth and to the building of the United States other than the Black woman. Wow. And so when I think of, why are we doubling down? Why are we, and I not asking for our voice to be heard, but saying that we need to have a voice in where America is going. Who else to do that? So that's one way to answer that question.
That's one way to
Jade.
answer it. I think it's a truthful way to answer it, because the questions are not often asked of other tickets when they don't look like this one. But just to be transparent about the process, there were other people that I considered. There were white males that I considered, some who had a strong background in military and defense, as does Claudelia. There were others that I considered to balance what I consider to be areas that I don't have as much expertise in terms of green policy, right? There were people who I looked at who were champions of green policy, because it's important to us that we become a nation that is also a good steward of our environment. What we ended up with was someone who had the same heart and vision for the nation. As you listen to us, you'll hear that there are points that we come at certain solutions from a different angle, but our heart is always the same. We both believe in prioritizing people over profit, politics, and personal agenda. We also believe in having diversified minds at the table. We have over 50 plus advisors and experts. Some of them we butt heads with quite regularly.
And we need that.
We need it. You do need it. We want to be challenged. We also don't allow experts at the table who won't allow themselves to be challenged back. So we believe that in every discussion, when you are deciding policy that decides the fate and the futures of the American people, you should spend a lot of time in that room tussling. You should spend a lot of time having to negotiate and get to a place where the most people possible are served. If you leave a room and you're all patting each other on the back and you get up and you all agree with everything, you guarantee that there are multiple demographics that are not being served. So we believe in putting devil's advocates in the rooms with us. We believe in having a diversified array of perspectives and backgrounds. At the end of the day, though, we rest on settling to see whether or not we are serving as many people possible, and that we're not serving only along partisan lines. That's why we run as absolutely independent candidates for president and vice president of the United States. Claudelia, I want to get into just talking a little bit more about you. We are both unapologetic nerds, so we can do policy talk all day. We can talk academia, whatever you name it, we can do that. And we will do that. We want to spend tonight helping you get to know who this woman is. Because as you know, no matter how much time we have left, we'll never have enough time to answer every single one of your questions. That's just how it is. So what you need to know is who we are, how we make decisions, what we prioritize, so that you can make a valuable prediction into the future about how we'll deal with certain situations. So part of that is helping them understand who you are, your character, your background. How would you just describe yourself, who you are, your personal life, those things? How would you describe that?
Sure. So I would say from the get-go, Jade, I'm unapologetically a woman of faith, a woman of family, and a woman who's not driven by fear, which is one of the big reasons why I said yes to this opportunity. I have a fantastic family. My mom and dad, who live in Illinois, both has served our country, the United States Army. My dad, several tours in Vietnam when he was younger. And even of my 6 siblings, there's a large percentage of us who have also served the military, either in active roles or for myself as a Department of Defense civilian. So pro family, pro military, and veterans. Absolutely, those who have served our country, my heart is there because I have that personal experience. Also, a big part of who I am, again, unapologetically a person of faith. And I think that that's something that will come forward as you get to learn more about me. And the things that are most important when I project my faith are really respecting each individual, believing that each person has value, and that they all deserve to have their voices to be heard. And so when we talk about prioritizing people over any political agenda, over policy, and over profit, that is at the heart of who I am as a person.
So, people hear that, and a lot of people get a little worried. They go, listen, I'm not religious, or I don't believe, I have a different faith than you, or what about separation of church and state? So will your adherence to your faith cause a conflict of interest as you serve Americans who do not believe like you do? where does your faith come into play in terms of your leadership? How does it inform your leadership?
Absolutely. So I think the first part of that, Jay, which I'll reiterate, is that one of the pillars of my faith is believing that each person, regardless of whether you agree with me on certain, religious policies or principles, believing that each person is of value, each person should and deserves to have their voice heard. And that at the end of the day, it's respect and honor that I offer to people. It's not trying to force you to believe things my way. I frankly do not believe that at all. I believe that our faith-filled history shows us that we benefit the most when we live an example of faith to people, not when we try to force it down their throats or anything like that. So what I offer is respect and honor for each individual. I ask and I request that same thing is offered to me as well, and that we're not going to agree on everything. We're not going to agree on every policy that might start or end with faith. We already know that, but let's come to the table and let's still figure out what best serves the American people.
I think one of the reasons people are so fearful when they hear someone speak openly about faith is because we have watched, at least those of us who consider ourselves be followers of Christ specifically, we've seen that be hijacked. One of the reasons that I came out openly with my faith out front is because I didn't want people to have to go dig, find out that I was a minister or had written a book on prayer and have to wonder if I was the same Christian as what they were seeing from another example, a negative example. So for me, it's not about holding up a Bible, right? It's not about pretending and putting faith out front in a way to get you to vote for me. For me, my faith informs how I respond to people, how I treat people, how I honor people. And so what we're finding is people who don't believe like this, others who don't even believe. We have atheists and agnostics who have found a home in Operation Restoration because they've never seen faith relate in this way. In fact, one of the running mates I considered was an agnostic. People would their minds would have been blown by that one, that I could dare to partner with an agnostic. But you see, in this season, this is what we must have. We must have unlikely partnerships by unlikely leaders who are ready to do an unlikely thing, which is to put politics to the side and actually serve people. Absolutely. And look for common ground instead of having us focus on divisive aspects.
Jade, I'd like to talk on one other aspect of our faith, which I think is really important, and that I think is not always seen in the public, especially by those who, offer that they are Christians, but we see behavior otherwise. One of the big ways that faith informs my decisions and my actions, that I'm required to hold myself to a higher level of accountability and integrity.
There it is.
I think what we've seen a lot out of faith people is that they want to hold everyone else to a standard of perfection and that sort of thing. But really, what our faith tells us is that we hold the greater judgment as being leaders and being examples and being servants of the American people. And so that's another way that I want to be transparent in that way and let you know that that's a core principle for me, is that at the end of the day, I am held to be accountable. I am held to have a high standard of integrity and to lead as an example for the people that I serve.
Well, I agree, which is why you're my running mate, because that's something we have in common. This idea that, when I see one nation under God, which remember, under God wasn't originally there. It was added. And it was added to draw a stark contrast between us and Russia at the time, which was, we wanted to make sure people knew that we weren't communists, so we added that under God. Some Americans say we should have never done that. We should have kept that separate. I like the addition because for me, it's a reminder, and I think COVID-19 was a reminder. George Floyd is a reminder that we are called to honor each other and serve each other and to love each other, to me, as God loves all the people that he has created. And so since he is no respecter of persons and he loves us all and he charges us to do the same, that is the reminder for me. Absolutely. You talked about your parents briefly, that they are both veterans. They've served this nation. You come from a family of overachievers, though. Your father achieved his high school diploma,
His GED,
his GED, while he was in his tours in Vietnam.
Yes,
how does that even work? How does that work? So he went in the military, and then what did he do in retrospect?
They were able to mail over some materials while he was over there working, and in between fighting, when he had some downtime, that's what he applied his time to.
Wow.
So from the time that I was a young child, my father has always said that his children are to be achievers. The challenging times, the difficult times that we experience in life are not the times when we need to falter, but they're the times we need to prove how much strength we actually have. And so that's those sort of principles have been embedded within me from very, very young. My mom is the same way. She's an educator. She spent many years educating at the college level. She has been a civil servant of the state of Illinois for several years, and she has just a teaching spirit. And from the time that we were young, my mom always said, readers are leaders, and so, instilling those principles from early on, that discipline, hard work, when there are challenges in life, that really proves who you are as a person. Those are the principles that my family has instilled in me. Kind of a no excuses, put your nose to the grindstone.
That's right.
Yeah.
We have one of the people watching, Marifa. He would love what you said about readers or leaders. I mean, this guy reads, feels like 12 books a month, makes the rest of us feel like slackers. But to watch for him, even what reading has done to transform him into a transformational leader. I would love to see us lead a nation that is its most informed in the history of the country.
Absolutely.
Imagine if we were a nation now who didn't allow the media or political parties to write our narratives. If people only knew what was going on behind the scenes to manipulate their vote, to manipulate you into feeling like you don't have other options besides the major party, you'd be astonished. We are chomping at the bit to be able to debate Kamala Harris for you, Joe Biden, Donald Trump. Oh, I would give anything to be standing on stage with them, calling truth to power on both sides of the aisle, calling out deception in real time. But do you know that the Republican and Democratic Party have signed something called the Memorandum Agreement, where they agree, they don't agree on much, right? But they agree and have put a law-binding agreement that has been challenged in court with no success. And right now, those two parties literally have a death grip on the debates. They disallow, you are not allowed as a third party or independent candidate to be on the debate stage. So we are wholly dependent in many ways because the media has refused to bring you our voice, to use social media and other platforms. What have you learned just from being in this process about things that we thought we knew as Americans when it came to elections and democracy? What are some of the things that have concerned you that you want to be a part of maybe dismantling into the future?
Yeah, absolutely. And Jade, you brought up a really good point with one of them, the memorandum agreement, right?
Yeah.
So when we look at the debates, without having that critical piece of information, what we tend to assume as the American people is that there aren't viable independent candidates out there, that they don't have enough support, that they don't have enough, that there aren't enough people interested in their platform to make it to the debate stage because you don't see them there. But again, what's really happening in the background is that there's been a chokehold on that information getting out to the American people. There have been independent candidates that are powerful, that have great platforms. Obviously, we're one that's running in 2020, but with this agreement in place, there is no way for an independent candidate to get to the base. So what happens then for the American people is that you are then forced into believing that you don't have another viable option, which is a complete deception.
That's right.
Complete deception. So one of the things that is important to me, again, coming from that place of integrity and transparency and accountability, is making sure that the American people can make informed decisions, which means not putting a chokehold on information that can be made available to them to make an educated decision. In my opinion, when people go to the polls, they need to be armed with, yes, this is the Democratic stance, this is the Republican stance, but there are also other alternatives that I can look to as well.
That's right.
I think that's incredibly important for the American people to know.
Thank you guys so much for watching. You are watching right now the introduction of Claudeliah Roze, who is my vice presidential running mate. She is the Operation Restoration choice for our purpose-based partnership. We believe that this is a job. The recovery of our nation is not a job for one person. No one president is going to be able to turn this around. They must have partnership all across the board. We must have experts who are working with us from beginning to end. We have that behind the scenes. We have advisors, we have experts. For me, the vice president is not just for show. The vice president is your partner in purpose. So as we come up with creative vision, we're so excited. So many politicians have seen our policy and they've been asking us, where'd you get that from? Right? We have other independent candidates who will remain nameless, calling us, trying to get their hands on our policy. And what people are realizing is our policy doesn't look like a Republican policy or a Democratic policy. And so they're wondering where we're getting this from. Well, as an artist especially, you better believe that my brain is wired to think creatively, collaboratively, outside of the box. Creativity is going to be crucial moving forward. Strategy is going to be vital. So I said I'd tell them why one of the reasons I wanted you as my partner was because you have a history where executive leadership comes to you to help them strategize through some things. So within your company that you work for, she works for a major company that specializes in aerospace and defense. And she's regularly consulted by senior and executive leadership within that company on critical matters that do two things. This is crucial. They come to you not just to find solutions that are going to help the bottom line, but that will also positively affect the culture, the atmosphere. What more do we need as a nation? We need to think about our bottom line, but we must change and rectify and reconcile the culture of our nation right now. Tell me about just your role in that way and how you end up consulting and the types of things you're helping people figure out.
Yeah, you know, it's really been a blessing. I'll say that, to be in some of the positions that I've been in. It's really been incredible to be in a place where your leadership comes to see you as a trusted person, someone who has a history of listening and being able to key in to the critical issues that are at stake. A lot of times there's a lot of rhetoric going on, a lot of voices, a lot of opinions, but being able to key in into what are the real issues at heart? What are some of the things that people really have concerns about? And not just being trusted by leadership, but being trusted by the people as well. Some of the employees in our organization who are the most affected by decisions from leadership. And so being a trusted entity for them as well. And so what I've seen in some of the initiatives that I led within our company are where leadership knows that there's issues and they just haven't been able to break through and see, how do our employees feel and what changes can we make for them. And so I've been really fortunate to be in that position to be able to do that. One of the big issues that's facing our corporation right now, of course, is related to diversity and inclusion, especially in the wake of what we've seen with George Floyd. And because of that, employees in different corporations are now being empowered to state that, we see the same sort of oppression in the corporate world. It's not just out on the streets. We've seen the same inequities and inequalities, oppression within the corporate world as well. And so to be able to navigate now those waters of what are our employees' concerns, being able to be an individual that they can come to with their candid opinions and know that they're not going to be muddied or watered down by other agendas, and being able to present that to leadership in a way that, if we're really going to make changes, if we really care about the employees in our organization, these are some of the hard topics we're going to need to address. These are some of the hard changes we're going to need to make.
That's good. I've been saying that if you really want to know, I run into people who are very shocked. They'll say, I voted for President Trump, but I didn't know he was going to be this way or do this. And so I always say that's a little bit, we have to take more responsibility, because you can know how your leaders are going to lead if you look at how they have lived. So as I've been looking for who this partner in purpose would be, I had to look at track records. What are the things they've always achieved in? What are the things they've always prioritized? So I've been saying, as an artist turned business owner, right, turned enterprise, someone who, is making a way to have the impact be broader and larger, that comes with an increase in revenue, right? It comes with an increase in status. But I remember the days where everything was dependent on whether or not I was going to play a gig. Mm-hmm. So what's important to me is that, as a former freelance artist turned business owner who's been successful in her own right, it was important to me now that I don't only identify with where I am now and forget the plight of people who are still on that journey. And so I wanted to see that kind of consistency. So as I look at your resume and your bio, it's powerful to see that a lot of what you do at your corporate job, and you don't have to do this, is you implement programs that create mentorship opportunities for other engineers like yourself that are coming up. And there is a focus on females, a focus on people of color. Tell us about that work.
Yeah, so one of the latest initiatives that I've been working, again, is related to diversity and inclusion, specifically for women and people of color. As we look at, you pick your favorite defense and aerospace company. As you dig into that, especially in the STEM categories, you will notice quite a disparity between, I'll just say, white males and women and people of color. And so one of the things that I've been leading is an initiative to close that gap, to make sure, one, that our leadership recognizes that is an issue, and it's an issue that employees are very concerned about. And it's something that we are not just willing to hear words about. We're just not willing for them to, speak to or listen to. We want them to take action. There needs to be action. And so one of the things I'm leading within that initiative is making sure that we're identifying who are already these top performing women and people of color that we've just kind of overlooked because they don't look like what we're used to seeing as leaders within our company. But my point has been, I think you voiced this as well, is that just because we haven't seen those people in those positions before, just because we haven't heard those voices before, does not mean that they do not deserve to be heard.
That's right. I've been saying that when people say, no one's ever heard of you.
Yeah.
And I say, listen, just because you have never been heard before doesn't mean that you're not worthy of being heard. We keep saying we want something different, but then when different presents itself, we find all these reasons to be against it. Listen, this is the crucial moment. People say, why are y'all playing around now? We can't play games. You're definitely right. We cannot play games with this moment. And I think we do the moment we're in a disservice by doing business as usual, politics as usual, church as usual. If we do all that stuff in the same way, we end up where we were pre-COVID. And let's be honest, going back to normal is not enough, because the same economic disparities, the same justice-based disparities will be there. We owe ourselves to elevate up into something new. We are both mothers. So you've got two kiddos. I've got two
awesome kiddos.
Two awesome kiddos. Tell me what you think about the idea of now having a mother lead the nation. What does that bring to the table? What's the benefit of having a mother be in office at this moment in time?
There's so much tied to that for me, Jade. I could spend hours talking about that, but I think I'll touch on two topics here. One thing that I want to pass to my children as a mother is that we are not victims of the circumstances and the structures that we encounter. You always have a voice. You always have a choice. And it's up to you to exercise that. What I want my children to take from me running as Vice President of the United States is that, wow, Mom saw some things that didn't sit well with her. Mom saw some things in our nation that didn't resonate with how she knows our nation was created to be and was set forth to be from its inception. And so she didn't sit back and complain about it. She didn't feel like she was a victim, but she actually went out and decided to do something about it. And that is one thing that I want to instill into my children. The other thing that I think is incredibly important is the principle of purpose. I think a lot of people can look at me as a mother and say, well, who's going to take care of your kids, and how are you going to be running the United States of America when you have kids as well? And that's a fantastic question. Thank God, for awesome resources that you can put in place, and family and things like that. But the other thing I want my children to learn is that you're created with a purpose.
Yeah.
There's a purpose on your life. And that the most important thing that you can do is pursue that purpose. It's prioritize that purpose. And things will fall into place when you do that. I tell my kids even now, you know, as I start to look at them, they're 8 right now, and they're starting to develop, you know, their own talents and their personality. And already I see in my children leadership and greatness. And I tell them that all the time. And so we have those discussions. What do you believe is your purpose here? How can I help you to achieve that? You know, let's talk about what we see in your future. And I want my children to look at me when they're older and say, you know, wow, Mom was a great example. She pursued purpose. She valued her voice. She valued her choice, and she exercised that.
That's good. I also think we can't lose the synchronicity of the moment where I feel like as a nation, we're in the middle of birth pangs.
Yeah.
That we are trying to birth something new. And I think there's something special to be had for women who understand what the birthing process is like. You know, in those last few pushes, you want to be anywhere but in that birthing room. You just want to tap out and, you know, tell everybody you'll see them later, but there's nothing you can do. That baby is coming.
It's coming.
It is coming, whether you want to or not.
We've seen some birth pangs this year.
That's right. And I feel like in this moment, it's not the time to just numb the pain. It's the time to really feel it, diagnose it, and really birth something new together.
That's right.
And I think that mothers, there's a nurturing capability that needs to be utilized in this moment. This nation will need to be nurtured back to health.
That's right.
It can't be instigated into worse conditions than it is. It can't be manipulated into a state of fear. You know, you need to judge now accordingly. How are your leaders really seeing you? I've been saying that since the beginning. Don't just ask yourself, what's our policy? Ask yourself, how are these leaders seeing us? If we value you, that means we won't back you into a corner based on fear. If we really value you, we're not going to cause you to make decisions based out of paranoia or fear, because if we win office, or if we're reelected, whoever's in office, if they're out of office, that fear is going to remain, and they've left you with that. That's doing you a disservice. So you want to ask now, what is it that your leader sees in you? What do they want to bring out of you? We probably have comments and questions that have been coming in. We'll go back and take some of those as well.
Sure.
What do you do for fun? Just ask some. We always go in so hot. We always come in hot, policy, race. You know, what do you do for fun? What does Claudelia do for fun?
That's a great question. So, of course, I love playing with the kids. We do our Lego stuff, and you know, we're big outdoors people, so we love to take family walks and bike rides and all that good stuff. I love to read, as I mentioned before. Like Mom instilled that from the very beginning. So reading, I like historical nonfiction and fiction. Obviously, you know, personal development books and things like that. I enjoy that as well.
What are you reading right now? Because literally, as we were driving into town, I drove the last hour. As we were driving into town, she was reading coming into Missouri. What were you reading?
Oh, so what I'm reading right now is Robert Pressfield's Gates of Fire.
Oh, wow.
Historical nonfiction based on the story of 300, right? So the last stand by the Spartans at Thermopylae, you know, in the times of the Greeks and Xerxes. And so, you know, I didn't know it at the time when I picked up the book, but it's also on Jim Mattis's top list of books that every leader should read. So, you know, shout out to General Mattis. I think former General Mattis. I think he's been a great leader for our country. And so, you know, one of the things I like to take away from what I read is lessons of leadership, lessons of resiliency and perseverance. That's what I look for. Strategy as well. And so that's been a fantastic book for that. So, you know, little shout out for Robert Pressfield's book and for looking at reading lists of leaders as well. I think the other thing I like to do in my spare time of, you know, stay active, of course, I like to stay fit and just spending time with friends and family. You know, pretty simple person at the end of the day. I'm a country girl. So, you know, family and outdoors is big for me.
Okay. What questions do we have?
So the first question we have is, you are open about being a Christian, but open about serving everyone. Tell us about that.
Okay, yeah. So,
Reiterate. Okay.
just to kind of reiterate what we talked about before, I think the two main things that influence my faith and that drives my faith and my actions is one, a respect and honor for every single person. Um, the second thing that I think is a huge part of that is the understanding that as a servant leader, I have the greatest sense of accountability and integrity that I have to pursue. So when I talk about this place of faith that I'm coming from, please don't see that as something that's going to be forced down your throat or pressured upon you. What you will receive from me is a listening ear, is honor, and then the fact that the heaviest weight is going to be on me to serve you.
That's good. That's powerful.
The next question we have comes from Maurice Boyd. He says, what is your plan for us as Black people? How will you bridge the gap when it comes to wealth reparations? Is that something you will push for us?
Yeah. So if you go to Operation Restoration 2020.com, you're going to click on Pro-Human. Then you're going to click on Shades of Breakthrough. We're doing something we feel is pretty revolutionary. We come to you both as Black women entrenched in multicultural settings. We are often one of the only in the settings that we're in. We're no stranger to being in the minority. I tend to not like the word minority. I consider myself a standout, that when you're in a room where no one else looks like you or has your background and your story, you have an incredible mandate to teach and broaden perspective. So, all that being said, you are looking at women who have lived a very specific life in this country as African Americans. And so while we will proudly be president and vice president to all, you better believe we will be champions for the underserved. So when you look at Shades of Breakthrough, you're going to see breakthrough for Black Americans. So Maurice, specifically, there are programs for Black Americans. We led with education reform. You're also going to see our proposals for economic justice, economic reform, and also law enforcement reform. One of the areas that Claudelia will be focusing on is criminal justice reform. And I'm excited about the panel of people who are informing us. We have the formerly incarcerated, the incarcerated. We have people who work in criminal justice, lawyers, because we don't want to put out policy that is not informed by the people who will be affected the most by it. So you will see specific policies for Black America. You'll also see specific policies for our indigenous people, Native Americans. You'll see specific policies for immigrants. You'll also see policies for small business owners. These are all groups uniquely, historically underserved. Small businesses, you saw us, I'm a small business owner, get really left out in the cold on that first stimulus package. So we're looking now to rectify long-held wrongs and injustices. And how do you now go about the business of building in systemic success to combat systemic injustice? How do you justify creating programs that focus on one people group?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, Jade. We haven't had much of a problem discriminating against certain people groups in the past. I think it's only right that we right those wrongs. I think it's a responsibility that we have as a nation to do that. One of the things that's near and dear to my heart is the criminal justice system. You know, we are now acknowledging decades down the road that we didn't handle the war on drugs properly, that we handed out excessive sentences. We're now looking at how many innocent individuals who are in the prison system that they should have been vindicated years ago. They should have never went to prison in the first place. And now we're seeing that there was systemic racism in place at that time that gave those individuals, innocent individuals, 20 plus year terms. And now we're going back and saying, okay, we made a mistake. And now we're trying to right those wrongs. But I think there has to be a greater push to do that. I don't think it's enough that they get out after 20 plus years, 30 plus years, and don't have the infrastructure in place to now create a life for themselves, where so much of their life was taken away. A lot of the rhetoric sometimes that I hear when people look at the protests and the riots is, where are the fathers of the minorities? Where are the fathers? Let's look at some of the inequalities that we've had historically in our nation. Let's look at the amount of Black men who are behind bars for crimes that we look at now, and we kind of say, oh, that's not a
Other
huge
people
problem.
get a slap on the wrist for.
Exactly. And that's one of the things I really want to address, Jade.
Yeah. And so just if anybody's wondering, I have been accused, because we had these platforms specifically for African Americans, of being racist, reverse racist. And so what I would challenge people who feel uncomfortable about thinking now about uniquely segmenting out groups to serve, here's how you can sleep easy at night. Whenever you serve the underserved, everybody else rises. Case in point, if you began to reinvest now in Black communities, Black businesses specifically, Black home ownership. Notice I'm not just saying minority business, minority home ownership, because the two things are different. Whenever we have generalized and just said, we'll serve minorities, let's serve minority business owners. Well, the stats show us that whenever we have segmented out minority business owners, the majority of that money has actually gone to white females who don't necessarily meet the requirement we're thinking of when we set those funds aside. No shade to my white sisters. I think that's great that they're getting funding, but we have to be honest and look at who still is being left out in the cold. Exactly. We have now economic proof that shows when you invest in Black communities, when you invest in Black businesses, you'd be increasing the GDP by 3 and 4%. So economically speaking, it makes sense for the nation. We as a country have gone abroad, helped other nations rebuild after the devastation of war. Why would we not reinvest in our own communities, tax-paying communities, by the way, in a way that would help them recover from the devastation of systemic injustice? So that's how we justify it. We don't actually feel like it needs to be justified, but that's how we explain it in black and white so that people can understand where our hearts truly are. Yeah. Any other questions? No? Wow, okay, that's good. Looks like you passed the test, Claudelia. Anything you want to say before we go? Is there anything you want people to know about maybe your vision for the nation? Yeah. How we see it, what it is that we're looking to restore?
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to end on two notes. The first note is that it will be an absolute honor to serve the American people in this capacity. I look forward to hearing and discussing the concerns that many of the individuals in our nation have, and figuring out how we can address solutions in those areas. When you talk about the vision for the United States, as I said before, I love digging into history, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, and I've read quite a bit of the vision that our forefathers had for the United States when it was first formed. And the interesting part of that is a lot of those statements that they made and vision that they set forward, they didn't consider people like you and me being a part of that and having equal access to some of those dreams and some of those resources that they laid out. What I look forward to doing for the United States moving forward is making sure that each of those demographics has a voice in what America looks like moving forward. I no longer want it to be a lopsided democracy that only serves a demographic at the expense of others. Yeah. Even when we look at how we've handled COVID, a huge disparity in who suffered the most from COVID. And moving forward, I want to make sure that we don't see that again. Again, that those who have been historically disenfranchised or oppressed, that they have the opportunities and access to fulfill their American dream as well.
That's good. I'm excited. We're both excited. If you are excited about what you're hearing and this vision sounds like your heart, it resonates with you, we dare you now to consider voting for vision over fear. We're in Missouri. We just came from Minnesota. Minnesota early voting started yesterday, and they can vote for us in Minnesota. We're releasing a list of all the states. We have a state map that'll show you where you can vote for us. In some states, you will see our name on the ballot. You'll see Jade Simmons, Claudelia Roze, right there, Oklahoma, Louisiana. In other states, you'll vote for us as a registered write-in. You'll see a blank space. You'll write in Jade Simmons. We'll make sure you know how to spell Claudelia's name as well. But I do believe as long as you write in the presidential candidate's name, they got it covered from there. But what's powerful is that registered write-in has the same weight as the name on the ballot. Do not let people make you think that a write-in is an invalid vote. It would be invalid if you wrote in your grandma or your cat or Elizabeth Warren, because Elizabeth Warren, as awesome as you might think she is, she's not a registered write-in in every state. So we have people in the ground doing the work of making sure we're available to you. So if you are in a state with early voting, most likely you can already vote for us because we've planned that accordingly. There are a few states that you will not be able to vote for us, and we'll release that list because we want to make sure that your vote counts and you're able to place it with the person you believe in. We're not in the business of peddling false hope, but we are in the business of giving you big, bold belief. And so we are viable, we're standing strong, and you can believe in us. We've done the groundwork to make sure that we're viable for you. Stay tuned, you'll see that states list. I hope you've enjoyed meeting Claudelia. I'm excited about what she brings to the table. We just want to get to work, right? Like, let's get through the election. Like, can we just get to work in rebuilding a country that serves the most Americans possible? Learn more about policy, Operation Restoration 2020.com. Follow us on social media, Instagram. Thank you guys for tuning in as well. Thank you on Facebook. We'll be back more. You'll be seeing more of Claudelia now. She'll be on sometimes by herself just to tell you about policy and her vision as well and to take your questions. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you.